Hello, and welcome to the Cash News Podcast. Informative conversations about all things currency and cash. We'll share insights on the issues affecting the world of cash today, like cash security, payments technology, and the cash supply chain. Your hosts, Tom Meehan and Sean Ferrari, hope to inform industry professionals and support better cash security and management by sharing the latest information on trends, strategies, and technology. This is the Cash News Podcast. Now, here's Tom and Sean.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cash News Podcast. Sean, what's going on?
Hey, good morning, afternoon, whenever you're listening to this. It's early June here that we're recording. We're just trying to stay on top of everything happening, doing a lot of planning on our end for upcoming stuff in the fall. We got through our big spring push of events. A couple more coming up at the end of this month, but after that, it's looking to the fall. So yeah, just a lot of pre-planning going on right now, for sure.
Yeah, and I think you have a ton of stuff going on post summer, right? Early fall.
Post summer, early fall, yeah, a lot of travel, a lot of different events. I think that's one of the things we're looking to talk about today, just in general, of just kind of. There's just a lot of payment stuff happening, a lot of whether it's crypto related or the Fed Now stuff here in the US getting ready to roll out over the coming month or so. Cash is always kind of there and stable, and it's happening. There's still efficiencies to talk about, but a lot of the newer stuff happening right now is in the payment space. So yeah, we've got a lot of payments focused events coming up. We've got 2 in Cape Town in a couple of weeks that we're getting ready for. So that'll provide a lot of interest and topics on that whole real-time instant payments front, cross-border payments, which I think from the crypto side, that was always kind of looked at one of the cross-border potential saviors. But I think it is, as we're seeing, it's a little bit hard to offload some money once you get it into crypto, and there's some fees associated with that. So depending on your structure, who knows? But yeah, a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that's this week in the news is really the SEC kind of cracking down on some of the crypto exchanges that are left, certainly Binance, and the news is the news, right? So like Vox does, their headline is now might be a good time for considering quitting crypto. The SEC is really, with this crackdown, I guess, going after a company to say, hey, in the early days of crypto, this loophole of you're not an exchange, it no longer applies. You're an exchange. You have to follow the rules. You have to disclose. So it definitely will impact. It has impact not only the value of crypto, and Bitcoin's probably the one that comes with that, but it also is kind of a good landscape to set the stage of what case law will look like. There have been some cases that have been going on for a really long time, XPR and some other things out there with that are still in limbo, but this seems like it's kind of the last ditch effort for some of these folks to say, hey, they've tried to get, and you say loopholes, they're not doing anything illegal, they're kind of walking around regulatory piece, but the US Securities and Exchange Commission this week have really said no, that's not going to happen. Binance and Coinbase, which were the two, first of all, very large, but also they are actually, I think I'm almost positive they're the 2 biggest in the world. If they're not the 2 biggest, they're definitely one through 3. And they buy and trade, and what they often were saying is no, we're an engine, but we're not actually an exchange or a broker. And they were able to, up until now, really stay unregistered with the SEC. That is not the case anymore. So this is kind of what I would say is the last of the evolutions that you and I think for the last a few years have been talking about. Like, eventually regulation was coming, and we knew that the taxation piece would come first, but this is the point where you start to say, what we saw with the PayPals and Venmos and some of the digital payments years ago of like, no, you can't pretend to be a bank. And when it's convenient for you, say you're not. And I'm obviously oversimplifying it, but Binance has 90 million active users. So like, and I think Coinbase has 110 million, real users. So this is not small stuff. Like this is massive amounts of people using these. So this is going to affect a large percentage of people. And I don't want to make any predictions here, but I think we're going to see an evolution in crypto, good, better, and different. There are some lawsuits against the SEC as well, trying to change this and say we're not doing these things. But the bottom line here is that they need to register. I'm shocked that they haven't. That in one sense, this validates crypto, and this kind of gets it closer to a more I shouldn't say legitimate, because the people that are listening are going to send me nasty messages but a more regulated currency. So I definitely see this as a change. You have any thoughts on it, Sean?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it is, as we've been saying, it's definitely, we knew regulation was coming. It needed it. I think there'll still be, I'm sure, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a way to help protect folks. I mean, it was a long time coming. I mean, I think obviously it's going to be the initial phases, and it's going to evolve, and we'll figure all that out. I think it's just going to be another step on kind of the continuum of which cryptos, which exchanges are kind of in this regulatory framework, which are kind of out of it. What does that mean? And we'll see what happens. I mean, I do think what's interesting too is the kind of CBDC aspect of it. I think it's been a little quiet on that front. I mean, we had the digital currency conference a couple weeks ago in Mexico City. A lot of good CBDC discussion there. And from that standpoint, there's definitely a lot going on, and companies are innovating in the space, and some central banks are really pursuing it. But I do think there's also kind of this watchful eye on a lot of the real-time settlement systems that are coming out now, and I think people are trying to figure out what does that new landscape look like, and then given that, what's the role for a CBDC? Or you can throw into that with crypto being regulated a little bit more now. What does that look like, and what is then the role for CBDC? So I think there's a lot of questions there still. In terms of, the private sector is going to move forward with some of this stuff, and let's see what happens before the public sector, at least from a U.S. perspective, jumps in. I think some of the other countries are obviously moving a lot faster in the CBDC space, but at the same time, I think crypto suffers from this as well. It's hard to understand for the average person how to use it. Why would I use it? What do I do with it? Just how do I get involved? So it's for those that are interested in a crypto asset or a digital currency or a CBDC. Yeah, it's fun to play with or use, for that matter. But for the average person, they don't even know where to start, right? And it's complicated and confusing, and yeah. So hence the reason why regulation will help in that space too, for that matter.
Yeah, I would I use Coinbase, so I have for a really long time. Coinbase, I thought, was did a really good job of trying to be transparent in a position where they couldn't be. There's some interesting specific from the Vox article. There was some really interesting stuff. There's a former SEC enforcement attorney made a comment, and he said it's a very scary. So enforcement attorney. Wow, that's an interesting title. He's former. It's a very scary situation for any customer. He says if anyone had crypto on any exchange, they should take it out immediately. That's coming from an enforcement attorney. Now, you never know with these articles what the rhetoric is, but we do know based on similar scenarios that it does create, a challenge. And then Binance's CEO had a lengthy statement that he released, but basically one of the claims he said is litigation, and litigation will undermine the America's role in a global hub for financial innovation and leadership. I don't actually disagree with that. I think that there is something to say about too much regulation could stifle innovation, but no regulation creates the challenge that we've had for the last several months here in the US, or last more than several months at this point, where you have extreme volatility. Your comment of just a general lack of understanding, that does come from regulation as well, where when there is a general lack of understanding of how to use it, it makes it even more challenging when it's not regulated, because there is this fear. And I will tell you, as someone that's been in it for a very long time, even certain exchanges are not easy to work with. That was why I like Coinbase. It's figuring out, as someone that's techie, like, what do I need to do? How do I protect myself? How do I do this? And in the past however many months, we saw several very large, very, very cash positive at one point FTX, BlockFi, Celsius. You saw these companies that were billion-dollar companies that literally overnight disappeared. Shaun is clearly having some technical freezing because we have a black box. He was frozen a little bit before.
I can hear you. I'm still here.
Yeah. Well, and it looks like at any time the camera might come on. It's one of those. Yeah, I agree. I think this is something that for the listeners, I'm going to take a note to just dig in a little bit further into to some of the SEC stuff, because I do think that sometimes putting some of this in layman's terms is a lot easier, because when you get into regulation and SEC stuff, Shaun probably can tell you better than me, you get into some deep financial regulatory stuff, and it is clear as mud. So
yeah, no, it's clear as mud, and unless it's like a really, really specific on a specific case or issue, you have to make a lot of assumptions. There's a lot of different interpretations. So it is interesting. I think the other interesting thing, I think it was this week that I saw, and it's something that you and I have been saying for, I don't know, at least a year, maybe more now, was so there was basically a statement that came out that was like, hey, you shouldn't be storing your money in Venmo. You should really do that. It's like, well, yes, right. You should. I was saying it's a great platform to move money back and forth to friends or to businesses or whatever, but you shouldn't. There's no insurance if you're storing your money there. So if something happens, it's gone. But
to that point, Shaun, I often say, because I speak about this all the time, like I don't think Venmo is a bad company. I don't think that's about. It's not about
right.
that. It's about that. When the reason the FDIC exists is because things happen, and it is insurance, and insurance is for the unforeseen things that occur. And we have proof, we have evidence to support what happens when you have companies that have tons of money, and then there's a catastrophic event and there's no insurance to back it. It's just like, hey, your money's gone. And so I have said often, like, Zelle is not like Venmo, right? Zelle is taking point to point. I'm not as
there's no cash sitting in Zelle.
But Venmo is holding on to your money. It's just the same thing. I use the Starbucks example all the time, because if you have a Starbucks app where you store money in it, one, Starbucks gets to make money off of your money, which is interesting. Two is it, not that it would, I'm saying it's going to happen, but it definitely could, is everybody who has money in those apps, if Starbucks had an issue, that money is gone. It's not insured, it's not protected, it's not safe. And anybody who houses your money in any fashion that isn't FDIC insured, there is a risk, plain and simple. And it's funny, like the stock market, when you trade on any platform in the stock market, I guess just because it's so mature, the disclosures, I mean, you can't even listen to a commercial without the disclosure of like, this isn't insured, this isn't safe. Any brokerage app, any bank you work with, they'll go out of your way to say all investments have risks. You realize this, right? Like, this is not protected money. But I think because we're used to that, it's this, we know that, and they go out of their way. With the coin exchanges, I think they did a good job of saying that, but I also think they did a better job of saying, but if you give us your money, we'll give you an 8% return. I think it was almost this, yeah, there's risk, but look at how, look how they would show a chart of the growth of crypto, and it would be like, oh, it would be ridiculous not to do it. And that's where that whole comment of like, and I know you and I joke about it, but like there have been some very, very important, powerful people in the banking industry that say it's a Ponzi scheme, right? As long as money keeps going in, you'll be fine. And the truth is that is exactly what happened with FTX, right? Because the second the flow stopped, the bottom fell out, and that's what happens in Ponzi schemes. So I'm not saying that, that I'm not making any claim that FTX or Sam Bank had that in mind. I'm just saying that there are eerie similarities. So this is definitely a space to watch. It will absolutely have an impact. I think the other, switching gears a little to some central bank things, is the Canadian central bank raised interest rates. I think it was this week, actually. If it wasn't this week, it was last week. They raised their interest rate. There's all this pseudo talk about what we're going to do. And then there was a ton of information or articles out which about China and how China's inflation problem is it has none, that they're not seeing the inflation, they're not seeing the growth. So the global economy is still in this weird kind of place. You have hyperinflation in the UK, you have Canada. We're in this spot where we're like, hey, we have great, we still have job growth, but the manufacturer and consumer goods cycle is going down. Retail is down, yet entertainment is up. So we're still in this very quasi strange scenario of sort of recession, not recession, what's going on, hyper political climate. So a lot of things to really talk about. Shaun, I know before we were talking about, because I know we only have about a few more minutes. I know we were talking about some of the things that Currency Research was working on. Did you want to chat about just some of the new things or adding the track in Orlando and some of those other things?
Yeah, sure. So we've got, as Tom said, there's a lot going on, a lot of interesting topics. We've coming up most quickly. We've got our payments events in Cape Town, which is our central bank payments conference. So there'll be a lot of central bank focused discussion there, and then we have a global payments summit there as well, which is going to focus on cross-border, everything about cross-border payments. So whether that's new instant payment systems to help money flow, whether it's digital payment, like mobile phone payment, or crypto that we've been talking about. So we'll have a whole bunch of discussions on kind of the cross-border challenges and some solutions out there. So we're looking forward to that. As I did mention, also, we're starting to plan for the Orlando event in November. It's looking great. As always, there'll be a strong cash agenda. So it's the America's Cash Cycle Seminar. We are adding a payments program to it this year for the first time. So it's going to be the America's Cash Cycle and Payments Seminar. And we're going to keep the strong cash focus, but we're going to add a day of dedicated payments topics from the Americas region. So expect a lot of conversations there on the evolving role of real-time payments and instant payments, especially with FedNow coming out presently, and we'll get a nice update from the Fed on that in November. We're also going to look at how kind of like fintechs are building on the new rails that the different central banks in the region are providing. So there should be some fun payment topics there too. So, we're thinking it is, as we talked about today, there's a lot going on in the payment space, a lot to talk about, but underpinning all of that is kind of the safety and security and efficiency that cash can bring too. So we definitely want to keep the focus there and make sure that the cash cycle is continuing to move in an efficient way. So we're working on those topics as well. We're going to focus on things like cash visibility, using different automation, and whether that's recycling, smart safe recyclers, different processing schemes, maybe different. We heard in Mexico City from some of the retailers in the LATAM region in particular, kind of using the whole concept of a virtual ATM type scenario at retail locations as being points of cash, to help distribute cash in more remote areas, or not even remote areas, but just an alternate means of distribution. So we're going to talk about that. There's a whole lot to talk about there. So we do want to kind of bring both the payments and cash worlds together in that. So we're looking forward to that. Then of course we're starting the early planning on stuff for next year, but we can get into that later. But that's kind of what's happening from my dark black box here in Zoom land.
Yeah, dark black box indeed. I was going to turn my video off, but it's more fun to leave it on. The man behind the curtain. Yeah, I mean, I think you've got a lot going on. We've got a lot going on. So I think what we're going to do is we'll gather some information on some of the SEC stuff, and we will also we think we might have a couple guests around cash and cannabis in the next couple episodes. Other than that, probably the bulk of the listeners are getting geared up towards summer. If you have kids, your kids are probably either out of school or coming out of school now, literally in the next 2 weeks. So we're definitely gearing up towards summer, and we will be back with you in the next episode. I do think we're going to look to have a guest, and then we will keep everyone updated, and we hope to probably everybody that's listening will see at some point. I know that there are a couple of US shows coming up, as well as some global events that either Shaun or myself will be attending. And then of course we're going to be in Orlando for the big one, which hopefully everybody that's listening is going to attend. And I think, Shaun, we should try to get a couple folks from Mexico City on too, from the digital space, that I'm sure would love to come on and talk about what their thoughts are on it.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. And as I mentioned with the Cape Town stuff at the end of the month, we'll try to do at least one, maybe two kind of live shows. Tom won't be there, but I will be. So we'll try to do a little on-site live filming and chat with a few people there as well. So should be fun.
Okay, awesome. Very good. Thank you everybody for listening. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you all soon.
All right, take care.
Thanks for listening to the Cash News Podcast. We hope you found this episode insightful. Don't forget to like and review us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter, and be sure to visit us at thecashnews.com to stay up to date with the latest on the world of cash. Thanks again for listening to the Cash News Podcast.